Russia is pouring tanks into its conflict with Ukraine, so we examine its tank inventory to see if it's running out. The Ukraine conflict has damaged an astounding number of tanks. Despite predictions of their extinction, tanks are crucial to both sides' military activities. Russia is relying on surplus Soviet tanks while Ukraine seeks Western tanks. After touting the next-generation T-14 Armata, the government currently fields antiquated T-62s. Putin and the once strongest Russian military should be concerned. What will happen to Russian armor? We're over 300 days into a conflict many expected to end in weeks. Daily, more Russian autos crash. Over 8,700 expensive military weapons have been independently verified, either destroyed, abandoned, or captured. However, this is a minimal estimate using public footage. Nearly 1,000 of these tanks have been destroyed, while the rest have been abandoned or seized. Russia started the conflict with 2,800 tanks, which seemed insurmountable for the outnumbered Ukrainians. But the Pentagon just reported that Russia has lost half its main combat tanks. Yes, you heard right. During the Kharkiv counteroffensive last autumn, the Russian army lost 10 tanks per day, while the Ukrainians lost 2, a surprising number considering the Russians were defending. With nearly 11,000 Russian soldiers killed, injured, and missing, casualties are orders of magnitude higher than the Soviet Union endured in Afghanistan in 10 years. The U.S. Undersecretary for Defense recently said Russia will lose this conflict. It seems reasonable, if not obvious. Ukraine has a tough journey ahead, but the world supports it financially. However, Russia does not. Nobody needs a rocket scientist to figure out that these losses are unsustainable. Why does Ukrainian armor outperform Russian? Pressure is building on Putin and his advisors. He is losing his armored army slowly but significantly. How did this happen? Ukraine dramatically outperforms Russian armor on the battlefield for many reasons. Ukraine's commitment and superior fighting philosophy are the main causes of Russia's armored flaws. Even at enormous cost, you struggle for independence. Despite heavy losses, Ukraine has shown bravery on the battlefield. Ukraine's tactics have also shined. It has used a variety of strategies to attain operational goals during the fight. It used tiny hit-and-run squads with its under-equipped, outnumbered men to start the campaign. This made sense with Russian columns on unpaved roads without fuel or infantry protection. Small crews with ATGMs might travel light until they reached a safe range, fire from covert positions, then light out before being spotted. This strategy helped defend Kyiv. Additional Ukraine resistance weapons. Western nations quickly recognized the effectiveness of using portable anti-tank missiles to destroy millions of dollars worth of Russian tanks and military vehicles at a fraction of the cost. This prompted them to invest heavily in Ukraine, helping the country develop ATGM skills through Western experts and trainers. Ukraine's resilience is demonstrated by its successful use of ATGMs, including 3 Western systems that have inflicted heavy losses on Russian forces. Manufactured by Raytheon Missiles and Defense and Lockheed Martin, more than 7,000 Javelins have been supplied to Ukraine since the conflict began. With a unique launch trajectory and 2 warheads, Javelins can overcome the best tank armor and defense systems. Each new missile costs about $78,000, but its high effectiveness makes it a top-of-the-line anti-tank weapon. The NLAW, a British lightweight missile, accounted for 30–40% of Russian tanks destroyed by mid-2022. Designed by Saab Bofors Dynamics, Swedish-British, the NLAW weighs just 12.7 kilograms, is easy to use, and can be fired from confined spaces. Each missile costs around $33,000, but its precision strike capabilities in overfly top attack and direct attack modes make it an effective tool on the battlefield. The AT-4 is a Swedish single-use anti-tank missile that costs just $14 to $80, but has destroyed many Russian tanks, including the $5 million T-90M ProRiv 3. The AT-4 can fire different types of warheads, some of which are capable of penetrating 600 mm of armor. Other weapons, such as the Switchblade suicide drone, have also contributed to slowing the progress of Russian armored units. Artillery has also played a key role in destroying abandoned or disabled tanks, according to a Ukrainian infantryman. Since the conflict began, an average of 4 Russian tanks have been destroyed every day, equivalent to burning tens of millions of dollars every morning. This situation has continued due to serious tactical errors by Russia, contributing to increasing losses of tanks and armored vehicles. As a result, Russian armored forces have suffered increasingly heavy losses, making it difficult to advance, especially in the cramped urban areas and vast rural areas of Ukraine. Ineffective tactics. Derivative experts advocate a poor Kremlin strategy. This relates to the unsuccessful Kiev push. The Russian military has relied on the Battalion Tactical Group for years. This combined armed unit of tanks, infantry, and artillery makes sense on the battlefield today. Russia appears to have prioritized armored vehicles, trucks, and tanks over the infantry needed to maintain, operate, and protect them in their BTGs. In principle, they would have powerful, maneuverable units working together. When Russian BTGs were attacked, there weren't enough dismounted troops to cover their armor or logistic trucks. Ukrainian attack teams in wait destroyed convoys. As they hid in thickly populated regions, forests, and other locales, the Ukrainians would shoot and retreat, leaving flaming car wrecks. If the Russians had sent more troops ahead and around their armored convoys, they may have detected and stopped these ambushes. There were other issues. An additional fault doomed Russia's tactics. Without air superiority, they couldn't rely on close air support to protect their armor. Additionally, they don't typically scout the region with drones or aircraft, leaving armor vulnerable to Ukrainian infantry that is hard to spot. Continuous overwhelming air supremacy and trustworthy information let American tank columns in Iraq and Afghanistan survive and avert thousands of deaths. Lack of logistics. Lack of fuel, food, and supplies on the front lines, combined with the inability to rescue tanks stuck in the mud, is creating a disaster for Russia. After the withdrawal of experienced battalion tactical groups, Putin was forced to use untrained conscripts. However, the BTGs proved ineffective, and Russia abandoned the model after huge losses in manpower and finances. Now, many conscripts are even willing to abandon their tanks rather than attempt to recover or destroy them to prevent them from falling into Ukrainian hands. Russia is trying to produce more tanks to make up for the losses, but the rate of production cannot keep up with the rate of destruction, about 30 tanks and armored vehicles per day. The problem is exacerbated by Western sanctions, which make it difficult to build modern tanks and missiles. Modern tanks rely heavily on electronics, such as targeting, communications, and guidance systems, which require imported components that Russia no longer has access to. Russia is using microprocessors from refrigerators and washing machines as a substitute, but this is not enough to meet demand. A British study found that 27 seized Russian weapons contained key components from 70 Western manufacturers, highlighting Russia's heavy reliance on foreign technology and its 15-year lag in semiconductor production. Price inflation has soared. The withdrawal of Western companies has led to high unemployment in Russia, forcing many industrial plants to close. Sanctions targeting small components such as bearings and fasteners have had a major impact. Some of these components are produced by only one source, making them harder to find, according to a U.S. Treasury official. To cope, Russian arms manufacturers have tried to buy components on the black market. However, the sanctions have forced the Kremlin to use Soviet-era arsenals that lack modern guidance technology. Russia has also had to salvage old equipment for spare parts, but this approach has not been effective. This is believed to be the reason why the T-14 Armata tank program never saw the light of day. Although hundreds of T-14s were ordered, they never entered production as originally planned. Russia does not have the resources or manpower to field a large fleet of T-14 tanks, even if it wanted to. Instead, Russia is relying on its Cold War-era stockpiles to make up for its military shortfall. After losing much of its equipment, hundreds of tanks from that era, including T-90s, T-80s, T-72s, and T-64s, are being taken out of storage, cleaned, and shipped to Ukraine. Notably, T-62 tanks, which have been obsolete since 1975, are also being repaired and returned to the field. This suggests that Russia is relying on older equipment because it has difficulty maintaining and deploying more modern tanks. Bother with Cold War relics? The difficulty of storing newer tanks is a major factor. Russia's attempts to refurbish and reuse antique tanks. Russia is struggling to repurpose its T-72, T-80, and T-90 tanks from its stockpiles due to the cost and complexity of maintenance, especially when advanced electronic components are hard to come by. Many older tanks are severely damaged after long periods of disuse. Wheels and tires are broken, wires are chewed by rats, and armor is rusted. This poses a major obstacle for Russian technicians. In this context, the T-62 tank, with its simple design and ease of repair, has become an alternative. Russia has about 2,000 T-62s in its Cold War-era inventory and is currently restoring them, including upgrading their engines, thermal imaging systems, armor protection, and communication systems. A factory in Chita is expected to restore 800 T-62s by 2025. Some were used to defend the northern bank of the Dnipro River after Ukraine liberated Kherson. However, the deployment of the T-62 in Ukraine represents a weakening of Russian military power. While Ukraine is receiving tanks from the West, it has captured and repurposed more abandoned Russian tanks than it has received. Many experts fear that Russia may be planning a new offensive in which conscripts and mercenaries will use the old equipment to wear down Ukraine's military. If the West stops supplying weapons to Ukraine, this strategy could result in a hollow victory for Russia, albeit at a high cost. Since the war is ongoing, the number of tanks destroyed may have changed by the time this video is aired. As outsiders, we don't desire war. Will Russia see the vulnerability and stop, or will Putin have other ideas? Stay tuned for future videos on both sides' latest advancements. Say goodbye and see you.